into a rickety plane somewhere over Western Australia. We're on our way to the Canning stock route to drive 1,000 miles across one of the most difficult, desolate and dangerous off-road trails anywhere in the world. It should be epic.
As the plane took off, I was suddenly aware of our isolation. We'd been dumped in the outback with food for a week and 7 Mercedes.
This will be our home for the next few days, the famous G-Wagon. Originally developed in the 1970s after the Shah of what we now call Iran requested a tough off-road Mercedes. It went into production in 1979 and it's still in demand. The Aussie Army just ordered 1,200 of these, although theirs aren't as plush as ours. Inside, if you can see past the dust, there's plenty of wood, leather and some funky seats that adjust to your shape and size. And there's certainly no shortage of off-road hardware, including a low-ratio gearbox and locks for the front, centre and rear differential. This is a proper off-roader for proper off-roaders, wherever they might be.
The stock route was built in the early 20th century by Alfred Canning to drive cattle across the deserts of Western Australia to the markets in Perth. Today it's famous as the Outback's ultimate off-road test. Going solo is tantamount to suicide, which is why we're in convoy.
We're cruising down the road at about 60 kilometres an hour, and as you can probably hear from my voice and the sheer vibrations, one of the biggest challenges we face is what they call corrugations. It's caused by the passage of vehicles and the frequency of the suspension, and it leaves these kind of tiny little ruts all the way along the surface, so everything's been shaken, and to be honest, it's absolutely exhausting.
And it's not just the humans that are suffering. The G-Wagons are sharing our pain.
Already it's taken its toll. We've actually blown both our rear shock absorbers. You can see the fluid on the wheel here. And we're not carrying any spares.
It was time for a bit of teamwork.
So this is the offending item, an AMG Bilstein shock absorber or damper if you prefer. Now normally that would sit on top of there like that and this would be completely full of fluid, but as you can see it's all gone. So we've taken it off, putting the wheel back on and we'll crawl our way into camp.
With no shocks, we'd lost control of the rear suspension, and that wasn't our only problem. We'd also broken the spare wheel bracket, and the air conditioning had gone pop in the 35-degree heat. The Outback had bitten us hard. As we made camp, we faced a tough reality. 5 of the cars had blown their shocks and realistically could go no further. Our only solution was to fork out 20 grand to charter a plane and fly in some spares.
Now if that sounds ridiculous, well, the only alternative is turning around and going home. Good morning. One of the biggest things about being in the bush is before you can leave every day, you've got to collapse your house, something that I find remarkably easy.
While we waited for our spare parts to be airlifted in, I got used to life as a bushman.
This is the appropriately named camp shower, which if I'm honest, could be taken either way. So you've had your shower, you've maybe not had a shave, and now you need a ablution.
Get off. Finally, the new shocks arrived, together with a few essential provisions. And as the mechanic set to work, I took a walk on the wild side.
One of the biggest dangers here in Big Sky Country is getting lost. Not so long ago, a vehicle broke down the route and the people got out to go and search for water. A couple of weeks later, a local drover found 2 decomposing human bodies and a decomposing dog. This place is pretty unforgiving. Of course, it's not really that hard to find our camp because somebody's erected a giant Mercedes flag. It's the Germans, they're everywhere.
As night fell, the G-Wagons were still being fixed, so I took the chance to learn more about the dangers of life in the bush from our flying doctor, Luke Bennett.
So Doug, it all feels pretty idyllic under the stars tonight, but what are the big dangers in the outback?
Well, there's well publicised dangers like snake bite and obviously road trauma along a track like this, as well as the chronic medical conditions that people bring with them on their travels.
Presumably one of the biggest things is the fact that we're, what, 800 miles away from anywhere?
Yeah, the remoteness of the Canning stock route is really the biggest medical issue, and in trauma we talk about the golden hour that you have to save somebody's life, and in Western Australia it really is more like the golden day.
So basically if anything happens, you've kind of got 24 hours to save my life.
If you've got 24 hours left in you, we'll do our very best, yeah.
My new best friend.
Thank you.
Next morning, with the shock absorbers fixed, we headed back out onto the route.
So what's it really like to drive in the bush? Well, this is a G350. It's got a 3-litre turbo diesel V6, knocking out 213 brake horsepower. It's the engine that's used in just about every other Mercedes, but it's been retuned here to give you a big wallop of mid-range torque, and in these conditions, it's just about ideal. We've been driving for over 6 hours now, and as fast as we dare as we try and make up lost time. We're following these narrow, sandy tracks. Every time you accelerate, the car's moving around and then it moves again under brakes, so you're constantly making little corrections on the steering wheel. It's exhausting, but it's tremendous fun. Canning's job was basically to build wells, with 51 of them spanning the entire length of the route. This is well 36 called Wonder, but this one's got a problem. Dead camel removed from well 1st of the 8th, 2011. Eventually the camel got dragged out and deposited here, where we find its rotting corpse. The flies and the stench, unbelievable.
Desperate to make up for lost time, we pushed on, hitting camp just as the sun packed up for the day.
So day 3 has been pretty full on, with dead camels, dodgy water, and over 7 hours of driving, covering some 200 kilometres. The cars are working fine now and we're just about back on schedule. But at 8 o'clock tonight, I am officially bushwhacked.
Day 5 started with a bang. A broken headlight was added to our list of woes, but in outback terms, that's no more than a scratch. Others have fared much worse.
Just by the roadside, we stumbled across another apocalyptic vision. It really does look like something out of a James Cameron movie. And it goes to show that if you crash here without support, you're in a whole heap of trouble. Did they get out alive? Hope so.
The Aussie bush is full of extraordinary sights, from real-life budgies to aboriginal caves, ghostly motorbikes and a dead man's shoe. But as for the famous outback bull dust,
I haven't seen any. Oh.
After another 8 hours of driving, it was time to kit down for the night.
Tonight I decided to dispense with the tent, partly because I can't be bothered to put it up, and partly because it seemed like a nice romantic image to sleep under the stars in the outback. That is, unless I get eaten, poisoned, or maybe abducted. See you in the morning, hopefully.
Suitably refreshed, it was on with the final day.
Seems hard to believe, but this is well 51, the final well. Canning arrived here in 1906, complete with 2 horses, 8 men and 23 camels, and it had taken him 6 months to complete the journey. Not for him, the joys of a G-Wagon. Canning's feat was incredible, but he wasn't exactly a nice bloke. He used to chain up local aborigines, feed them salt and make them lead into water. Then he used to chase their women. The expedition chef was so disgusted that he launched an official complaint, and there was a royal commission which declared that Canning's actions were reasonable.
With the final well behind us, it was time for a bit of reflection. Our fabled wagon had had a tough time.
We started off with an 80 grand showroom vehicle, and we broke the bracket which holds the spare tyre. We broke 2 left rear shock absorbers, 1 right rear shock absorber. We had a left rear puncture. We broke the air conditioning. We cracked both the housings for the wing mirrors, although to be honest in these conditions that's to be expected. We broke the sand pole which identifies us in the dunes, and then to cap it all somebody reversed back into us, breaking our left front headlamp.
But while we'd struggled in our leather-wrapped cocoon, there was one military-spec G-Wagon that had run faultlessly.
G-Wagons aren't about leather trim and surround sound. This, the professional, is a proper G-Wagon.
As we turned off the Canning stock route, the road opened up and we could almost smell the victory pint. But then the bush threw up a final curveball.
We've got another problem. The car seems to be overheating, so the technicians are having a quick look and hopefully we'll be on our way soon.
The crash on day 5 had damaged a radiator pipe that had finally burst. Now, all we could do was tape it up and hope for the best.
So we've ended up expending our drinking water in the coolant reservoir. It's a Heath Robinson solution, but out here in the Outback, sometimes you've got no option.
It was a difficult end to the trip, but after limping our way to Halls Creek, we were finally back in civilisation.
This has been an epic adventure. I'm certainly not going to miss the car-destroying corrugations, the constant battle with dust, or the fact that everything has a spike and is definitely trying to kill you. But I am going to miss this extraordinary country, the camaraderie we developed as a team, and despite the occasional tantrum, I am going to miss my G-Wagon. Time for a shower.